There is a sound that defined an era. Not a song. Not a catchphrase. It was a laugh. Effervescent. Uncontrollable. Almost childlike. That laugh belonged to Goldie Hawn, and for nearly 50 years, it convinced the world that she was Hollywood's eternal ray of sunshine. But sunshine, as she learned, casts very long shadows. At 79, Goldie Hawn has decided to stop protecting people. Not with fury. Not with a memoir full of scandals. But with something far more dangerous: quiet honesty. In a series of rare, reflective conversations, she allegedly named 6 actors she could not stand. Not rivals. Not frenemies. Actors she actively, deeply, disliked. And here is the twist you won't see coming. Most of them aren't villains. Some are beloved. Some are icons. One is a saint to the rest of the world. But to Goldie? They were the reason she almost walked away from everything. This is not a story about hate. It is a story about what happens when the world expects you to keep smiling and you finally decide to stop. To understand who Goldie Hawn disliked, you first have to understand the cage she was born into. Not a physical cage. A psychological one. In the 1970s and 80s, Hollywood had a very specific box for women like her. Blonde. Bubbly. Non-threatening. The industry paid her millions to be delightful. But delightful people, she learned, are not allowed to have edges. Her biographers have noted a quiet pattern. Nearly every conflict in her career began the same way: a male co-star underestimated her. Not her talent. Her presence. They saw the giggle. They didn't see the producer, the mother, the woman who had built an empire while raising 3 children. So when she finally let slip through intermediaries, through old interviews recently rediscovered, the names of 6 men she would never work with again, Hollywood didn't gasp. It leaned in. Because for once, Goldie Hawn wasn't laughing along. The first name will not shock you. It might even feel predictable. But the story behind it is not what you expect. Goldie Hawn reportedly singled out Chevy Chase. Not because of a single fight, but because of 1,000 small cuts. On the set of Foul Play in 1978, the chemistry on screen was electric. Off-screen? It was Arctic. According to crew accounts from the time, Chase had a habit of rewriting Goldie's lines without asking. He would deliver a joke, wait for the laugh, then turn to her and say, "See? That's how you do it." She laughed it off. On camera. Between takes, she said nothing. But decades later, she described the experience in quiet terms: exhausting. Humiliating in small doses. She never worked with him again. Not for money. Not for nostalgia. When a studio offered her a sequel for triple her salary, she said no. That was her power. Not revenge. Refusal. The second name is more complicated. Dustin Hoffman. A man many call a genius. But genius, Goldie learned, does not always see humanity. The story goes back to the early 1980s. Goldie was chasing a serious role, a dramatic part that would finally bury the dumb blonde stereotype. She auditioned for a film opposite Hoffman. She had prepared for weeks. She walked into the room nervous but hopeful. Hoffman barely looked at her. He read his lines flat. Then, halfway through her emotional peak, he stopped and asked the director, "Is she going to do that giggle thing? Because I can't act against a cartoon." She finished the scene. She thanked everyone. She walked to her car, sat in the driver's seat, and cried for 10 minutes. Not because she was sad. Because she was angry at herself for expecting respect. She later told a friend, "He didn't see me. He saw a haircut and a reputation." Hoffman has never commented. He likely doesn't remember the moment. But Goldie does. She always does. The third name is the one that will break your heart. Kirk Douglas. An icon. A hero to generations. And according to Goldie, one of the most condescending men she ever met. This wasn't about a film set. It was about a charity gala in the late 1990s. Goldie was in her 50s. She had produced, directed, and raised millions for mental health awareness. She walked up to Kirk Douglas to introduce herself. He looked at her, patted her cheek like a child, and said, "You're still so pretty. What's your secret?" She said, "Hard work, Mr. Douglas." He laughed and turned to talk to a younger actor. She later told a journalist, "I realized in that moment that some men will never see you as a peer. No matter how old you get. No matter how much you achieve. You're still just the girl." She never named him publicly. But those close to her confirmed, Kirk Douglas made her feel invisible. And invisibility, for someone who spent her life being seen, is the deepest wound. The fourth name is Bill Murray. And this one is different. Not condescension. Chaos. In the mid-1980s, Goldie was attached to a comedy that Murray was circling. They met for a creative dinner. It went well. Too well. The second meeting, however, was a disaster. According to a producer who was present, Murray arrived late, refused to read the script, and spent 20 minutes doing impressions of Goldie's previous roles, mocking her accent, her physical comedy, her very essence. She laughed. She always laughed. But afterward, she called her agent and said, "I will never share a set with that man. He doesn't want a co-star. He wants an audience." Decades later, when a reporter asked if she'd ever work with Murray, she smiled her famous smile and said, "I don't think he'd want to work with me. I'm not very good at being a prop." That was the end of it. No feud. No tabloid war. Just a boundary, quietly drawn. The fifth name is Warren Beatty. And here, the story shifts from professional frustration to something more personal. Goldie and Warren never dated. That's important. But he wanted to. In the late 1970s, at the height of his power, Beatty pursued her with legendary persistence. She declined. Politely. Repeatedly. And then, according to multiple industry sources, the temperature changed. She was suddenly out of running for 2 major films. Directors who had praised her went silent. A casting director told her assistant, "Warren's camp said she's difficult to place." She never confronted him. She simply removed herself from his orbit. When asked about him years later, she said only, "Some men don't know the difference between romantic and relentless." That was her version of a burn. Quiet. Elegant. And absolutely final. The sixth name is Sean Penn. And this one happened in public. In 2015, at a Hollywood fundraiser for mental health, Goldie's cause, Penn was in the audience. Goldie gave a short, heartfelt speech about her work with children and anxiety. As she walked off stage, Penn reportedly muttered loud enough for several people to hear, "Stick to yoga, Goldie." She didn't react. She walked to her seat. She stayed for the entire event. But 2 days later, she quietly declined an invitation to a dinner where Penn was the guest of honor. Her assistant's message was simple: Goldie has a prior commitment. The commitment was to her own peace. Now. Let's pause. Because the word hate is heavy. And Goldie Hawn, at 79, is not a bitter woman. She is not sitting in a dark room, rewriting history. She is surrounded by children, grandchildren, a partner of 40 years. She has won. Not just in Hollywood. In life. So why name names? Why risk the controversy? Because, as she once said in a rare moment of vulnerability, "I spent 30 years being afraid to say that hurt me. I don't have 30 more years." This is not a revenge list. It is a liberation list. Every name she allegedly spoke was not an enemy. It was a lesson. Chevy taught her that not every laugh is friendship. Dustin taught her that genius without empathy is just noise. Kirk taught her that age does not guarantee wisdom. Bill taught her to trust her gut. Warren taught her that no is a complete sentence. And Sean taught her that some people are not her energy to carry. Hollywood loves a villain. But Goldie Hawn never wanted to be a hero. She wanted to be a person. And persons get hurt. Persons hold grudges. Persons forgive not by forgetting, but by finally speaking. At 79, she has earned the right to say, I didn't like them. I don't have to like them. And I am still here, whole, without their approval. The 6 actors she hated. 6 men who probably never lost a second of sleep over her. But she lost years. And now, she's taking those years back. That is not hate. That is freedom. Do you think Goldie was right to finally speak her truth? Or should some stories stay buried? Comment below. And if you want more untold Hollywood histories, subscribe and tap the bell. The reel is never over. It just gets honest.